Welcome to the show, and we will open the phone lines as we do each and every day between 11 and 12. Lots of calls yesterday. Obviously, a lot of people still talking about what's going on with the fires. Fortunately, the Bears Lake fire is now, I guess, contained. That's the way that they're describing it, so that's a good thing. And thanks, of course, to all the firefighters and everybody who's had a role in that. That's for sure. And thanks to New Brunswick as well for supplying those water bombers, which I've heard were on loan from Quebec to New Brunswick. But nonetheless, New Brunswick didn't need to, I don't think, deploy those resources, but did. And it's a good thing they did. And speaking of which, Tim Houston, the Premier of the province, says an assessment done after the 2023 wildfires found the province's firefighting helicopters were sufficient for the vast majority of wildfires in Nova Scotia. He says the help from New Brunswick, a day after Nova Scotia sent a crew there to help fight fires, shows the coordinated response between provinces is working. Is this acceptable in your opinion? Do you buy this? Do you believe this? I personally don't. I can't see how it would be sufficient for Nova Scotia, but every other province has water bombers. I believe every other province has water bombers. Certainly Newfoundland does. I don't know. PEI I don't think does. But I don't know how the Premier can justify not ordering or not being proactive, especially after what happened in Tantallon. You would have thought that they would have done everything they could to start the procurement process for water bombers. I get it. It takes years in some cases to get water bombers now because of the competition and the need. I read a story yesterday on the CBC website, Saskatchewan, I believe, has an order in for water bombers. They put an $80 million deposit down, and they're going to be 2033, I believe it is, till they get those orders filled. So let's suggest that back in 2023, the government would have said, look, we need to do something with this, so we need to take every measure we can to procure water bombers. We would be 2 or 3 years closer to getting them. But now we're still flat-footed. We still don't have any orders on the horizon. And I simply just don't buy this line that it's sufficient, that helicopters are sufficient. I really don't. If that were the case, then why we wouldn't have needed these water bombers from New Brunswick? And we're relying on the goodwill of other provinces. And we're relying on the other provinces not needing the assets. And that's not a good situation to be in my opinion. So one of the questions that I'm going to ask you to weigh in on, do you agree with the assessment done after the 2023 wildfires and the Premier's comments yesterday that they're sufficient for the vast majority of wildfires in Nova Scotia helicopters? Something that I'll ask you to weigh in on. Also, another thing that I'm going to ask you to weigh in on, golf courses. I saw a story on the Global News website this morning. Golf courses in Nova Scotia, they're asking some people to not smoke while on the course. I mean, really? We know that golf courses, depending on the course, of course, are wind into wooded areas and go deep into forests in many cases. And golf carts go along cart paths which are right along the tree line often. And we know that, look, if you've played golf, you know that a lot of people smoke it there, smoke cigars and cigarettes and weed in some cases. And why is it that golf courses are allowed to remain open and operating and at a time when other activities are closed to the province? Is this a double standard? And is it this type of policy that makes some people kind of question why they're not allowed to go out? And again, I'm not trying to stir it up, folks. I'm just trying to look at this logically. Why would golf courses be allowed to operate? If, in fact, public safety and the risk is far too high to have anybody in the woods doing any activity, why is this activity allowed? Just something else that you can weigh in on when we open the phone lines, as mentioned, in about an hour's time, and lots of other things as well that we can get to. Air Canada, are you affected by this flight cancellation because of the flight attendant's work stoppage? Something else that you can get into? And other things as well I've got in the pile. Again, we'll open the phone lines in about an hour's time. I'd like to thank Vanessa Vandeness on the other side of the glass of the control boards, doing a fine job as always. All right, joining me here in studio is Janet Steele, HRM counselor for Timberlea, Beechville, Clayton Park, Wedgewood. Janet, thanks for joining the show.
Good morning, Todd.
Thanks for the coffee.
You're welcome. Another counselor trained me well.
There you go. That's right. We appreciate it. All right. So I saw a story in the Chronicle Herald this week, And the headline, Halifax pushes province for municipal lobbyist registry, and this is tied in with a motion which you've recently tabled. Tell us about this motion.
Yes, Todd. Before I begin to talk about the motion, maybe I'll explain what I mean by lobbyist, just so everyone in the listening public knows. This is not a constituent contacting their councillor or their MLA or MP. This is someone who is paid to try to influence decisions. And they could be influencing a councillor, an MLA, an MP, or a public servant. And so they're communicating with a public servant in an effort to influence a decision, and they're paid for it. That's what a lobbyist is. So what I wanted to do is have more transparency for residents, more transparency into what goes into decision making at the municipal council level. Currently, the province of Nova Scotia has a Lobbyist Registration Act. The municipality is not covered under that act. And as a municipality, unlike a few other municipalities across the country, we do not have our own lobbyist registration system. So I'd like to bring this system in for more transparency on decisions. And I'd like to tie this into the discussion that's been all around us on strong mayor power. And because if we move to strong mayor power, there will be even less voices speaking, less influential voices at council influencing decision making. If we were to adopt strong mayor power, similar to what's in Ontario, the mayor with a one-third majority, a one-third of council could push through bylaws, push through development decisions. We did change our election campaign financing with respect to municipal elections over the past few campaigns. So now businesses cannot contribute directly to campaigns, but we see the individuals that are running these businesses contributing to the campaigns of individual councillors as well as the mayor. And what I would like to see is who is lobbying the mayor, councillors, senior public servants on behalf of investments that developers and other people may wish to make in the city. So this is about maintaining integrity. It's about residents, constituents knowing what is influencing the decisions. And particularly if we were to move toward a system where the mayor, where the CAO and perhaps senior staff could be hired by the mayor's office, it's particularly important that we have more transparency and that the public is aware of all the influences on decisions.
Okay, would there be some cost? So I suppose there'd be a cost associated with the lobby, with the registry, rather?
Yes, I can speak to that. So in 2018, there was actually a council staff report that looked into whether Halifax should establish its own municipal lobbyist registry. And a decision was made to request that the province include us under their existing registry, seeing that as a less expensive option to go forward. There is already a registry in place. There's already a system for monitoring it. What I would suggest, though, Todd, if we don't have a response from the mayor's letter to the province requesting that we be covered by the municipal lobbyist by the provincial lobbyist registry, that what we could reconsider in Halifax is looking at what it would cost to bring in our own registry. And I understand some of the technology has changed, that it may be less expensive in the future. Since I brought forward this motion, which was, I'm pleased to say, unanimously supported by the mayor and council, I have heard from a number of companies that supply this service, and they're suggesting that it could be brought into Halifax for less than what we originally thought in 2018.
Okay, would this be another example of the province needing to give its blessing in order to get this?
Yes, the province would need to give its blessing. And, the 2018 communication went forward from staff to senior staff in to provincial staff. We have not had a response on that. So this is why my motion was to request the mayor write to the province requesting that this be done.
Right. My, oh my, it seems endless how many things are overarching by the provincial government, right? I mean, really, they have so much authority, and that's really coming to light right now when we're seeing what the Minister Law recently denied the
regional
council,
plan.
The regional plan. And there have been lots of other examples as well. And you mentioned strong mayor powers. That was at the discretion of the provincial government and could be decided arbitrarily by the premier, right?
It could be decided by the premier. There is an example. There's a few examples in Ontario where strong mayor power is possible, but the mayors have not accepted it because they didn't feel that it was necessary to do the work of the mayor. They had a strong working relationship with council and were able to achieve their agendas without using this mechanism. Mm-hmm. So a number of cities in Ontario have not accepted it. So it would be possible that strong mayor power could be on the books here in Nova Scotia, but it may not be necessary for Mayor Fillmore to exercise strong mayor power.
Well, based on the conversations that I've had with him, I would suggest that he would accept those added additional influence and power.
Yeah, that's possible. I think it depends on. There's been a strong public reaction to strong mayor power. If you look at the letters that we've received as councillors, there's quite a bit of opposition to strong mayor power, particularly now with the current mandates of both the current council as well as the provincial government. There was no discussion of strong mayor power during the municipal election in October of 2024, nor was there a discussion in the provincial election in November of 2024. So I would think that Mayor Fillmore and also Premier Houston would be looking at that feedback and considering whether they have the moral authority to grant strong mayor power in this current environment. And particularly where I believe residents, many people are seeing the authoritarian tendencies across the world. They're seeing that our democracy is very fragile, and I think they wouldn't wish to tamper with it. They may, but I would think it's at their peril.
Okay, and perhaps again should have been, if this in fact were going to be instituted, should have been presented at election time by both the provincial and during the provincial and municipal elections, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. People may have voted differently. Some councillors may have chosen not to present themselves for office. There may have been, I think residents may have seen there's risks inherent in strong mayor power. For example, if a councillor maybe wasn't on the good side of the mayor or the premier, maybe that's where a construction and demolition site would be built in their district as opposed to another district. There are decisions that could, hurt, I think, the overall public good of HRM if strong mayor power is introduced.
Well, you'd have to be pretty vindictive to do something like that, though, to use those powers in that way, would you not?
You would. Yes, you would. But politics sometimes can be very messy.
Do you think Mayor Fillmore would be capable of being that personal?
I can't comment. I haven't. Mayor Fillmore does not have strong mayor power. We don't have any experience in that area. What I am seeing though is we're seeing issues like bike lanes being used as a wedge issue to justify strong mayor power. So that's playing politics, in my view, with people's lives, with safety. We see, physicians groups, other groups coming forward with very important arguments about community safety. We see discussion about bike lanes as being expensive when, I think in 24-25, we spent $4.6 million on bike lanes out of a $1.03 billion budget. So numbers are being escalated. Incomplete information is being shared with residents and is being used as a wedge issue because, yes, we're all frustrated with congestion. Congestion in the city is related to a variety of factors. Most importantly, our rapid population growth and the fact that we don't have rapid and reliable transit to get people around. And, bike lanes are an affordable option, as is transit. And we need to be investing more in that. So that's why I'm so disappointed to see this issue being used when it's, yes, there's probably a few streets where bike lanes have slowed traffic, but so have some of the turning lanes that have been changed to make it safer for vulnerable road users as well.
Well, there have been some stakeholders within the business community who have not been on board completely with bike lanes. Paul McKinnon, for example, I had on the show yesterday with the Downtown Business Association, said that it's controversial and not all his members are on board with it. So it's not just politicians making this a wedge issue, is it?
I think there are some businesses who may not like, I think if I understood some of his comments, and I didn't hear them all, he's concerned about the Brunswick Street work that's currently underway. I guess you could argue that the summertime is a time for lots of tourists, but you could also argue that it's a little bit quieter in traffic because schools are not in, the universities are not in. So when is the best time to do some work? I know many tourists come to our city because of the bike lanes, and we're hearing a lot of commentary about people not being able to go out now on the trails. But some of these people also came here to use bike lanes and to get around the city that way. So, yes, we need to pay attention to all of our stakeholders, whether it's support, whether it's Emerge and EHS, and whether it's the business community. But this is a city for all the residents. It's not just the business community. The bulk of the people I'm hearing from about bike lanes, they support the bike lanes. And they would like to see the continued expansion, the completion of the All Ages, All Abilities network so that this is a viable option. One of the other transportation options, the whole modal share shift, moving away from cars to transit, to the new ferry that's being proposed, to bike lanes, providing transportation options for residents.
You say people come here to use bike lanes specifically?
They come here to see the city and they use bike lanes to get around, as I do when I visit other cities.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the premier. So the premier is he part of the making the wedge issue here? Is he part of that?
I haven't talked to the premier, so I can't say that. Well,
you've heard the premier's comments.
I've heard the premier's comments, and perhaps he is. I'd like to think that the premier supports a healthy environment. One of our biggest budget items here in Nova Scotia is healthcare. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the pie chart for Nova Scotia expenditures, we're spending a lot on healthcare, and we need to spend more. And a healthy, active population moving around on bike lanes, even walking to transit, is healthier than driving in a car. The premier, we have a budget issue. We need to pay for the increased healthcare costs in this province. Reducing healthcare costs can be achieved by having more active transportation. Bike lane in my district, the thing we value the most is trails. We have the beautiful BLT trail, the mainland linear trail, the Chain of Lakes trail for part of it as well. So residents use that to have active transportation. In the downtown core, there's not the same option for trails. So bike lanes needs to be it. Yeah.
Okay, Janet, appreciate your time. Thanks for coming in. Janet Steele, HRM Counselor, Timberlea, Beechville, Clayton Park, Wedgewood. The Canadian Veterinary Medical Association has issued a following position on fireworks, and it is opposed to commercial fireworks. We'll get to this when we come back. The Canadian Veterinary Medical Association says that fireworks pose a number of risks to all animals exposed to them and opposes the sale of consumer fireworks to the general public for personal use and calls for fireworks displays to be limited to sanctioned and regulated public events only, accompanied by advanced warnings to animal owners, caretakers, and wildlife officials. Joining us to talk about all of this is retired veterinarian Dr. Hugh Chisholm, who organized the group #FireworksHurt. Hugh, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time as always.
Oh, thanks for the invite, Todd.
All right, so you've been talking about this now for a number of years, and are you making any headway, do you think, when it comes to public opinion on this?
I think we are. I think it's one of those things. Change comes gradually, as you know, and so I knew when I got into this fight that it was going to be, a prolonged battle, and it's a change, something that's become, sort of accepted practice over the years is never an easy thing. But when you take a look at all the impacts that fireworks have on animals, on humans, on the environment, and so on, it's common sense, really. And most people, when they see the evidence, are in agreement that yes, it's time for change.
Is there a lobby group that opposes this, or whom does it benefit to keep fireworks going here?
Well, obviously the fireworks industry is making profit off the sale of fireworks, and so I think that they obviously must have a very strong lobby, and I think partly governments are afraid to bring in restrictions that limit what people can do, because we're in a culture now where a lot of people think that government is telling them too many things and they don't like it, and they want to do what they want to do. But we need to be prepared to draw a line in the sand about certain things, and in my opinion this is one of those things that we have to draw a line and say enough is enough, and put an end to the foolishness that's been going on for the past couple of decades.
All right. So, Doctor, if somebody asks you fundamentally, quickly, if they say, why do you have this opinion? What is the basis of why you feel so strongly about this? What's your response?
Well, first of all, I would say it's not just me. With this position statement that was just released by the Canadian Veterinary Medical Association, this represents all members across the country. There are thousands of veterinarians within the Canadian Veterinary Medical Association, and when I proposed that the CVMA have a look at this, and I made a presentation to the Animal Welfare Committee, I was actually blown away by how strongly veterinarians feel about the effect of fireworks on animals. I mean, I know how I feel, and I, would hope that I could convince colleagues out there to feel the same, and it took very little convincing, because virtually every veterinarian has had experience with animals that have suffered as a result of fireworks being set off, and not just the fear of the fireworks, but the injury that results in many cases. And it's just something that veterinarians are tired of having to deal with, and so putting out a statement like this in the public is a very strong way of saying, this is wrong, we feel something needs to be done, and hopefully it will be one piece of information that people that are trying to make change, like we've been doing here in Nova Scotia, can point to and say, look, it's not just us. The Canadian Veterinary Association is opposed to this, and a couple of years ago, the Canadian Association of Fire Chiefs came out with a statement opposing the sale of consumer fireworks. So, it's the evidence is building, and the more it builds, the harder it's going to be for politicians to just look the other way, or to say, it's not my problem. Some other level of government can deal with this, and that's just a cop-out.
Right. So the provincial government could end this. They have the jurisdiction to put an end to the sale of these products. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Section 29 of the Federal Explosives Act gives municipalities and provinces the right to enact bylaws to control the sale and use of consumer fireworks.
Has there been any municipalities that have suggested that they might do this, to your knowledge?
Well, I know HRM looked into it a few years back, and the legal advice at that time was that they didn't have the authority to do it. I think they need to maybe take another look at that. But the problem with doing it at a municipal level is, okay, if there's a ban on the sale and use in HRM, people will just go, to another county or another municipality, buy their fireworks and set them off. And enforcement, as we've seen here, is virtually non-existent. So, if you can't enforce the use, you can certainly enforce the sale, but you got to do it at a broad level, like they've done in Prince Edward Island. It's against the law to sell or to use consumer fireworks over there. If you have a permit and a license and so on, you can do it. But we need to put restrictions on this. Just being able to walk into a big box store and buy a few $100s worth of recreational explosives, especially during a burn ban, does that make any sense to anybody?
Right. Okay, if people want to know more about this or they want to support your group, how do they do so?
Well, the position statement, if they want to read that, they go to CanadianVeterinarians.net, and it's under the policy and outreach section there. Our group is banfireworksnovascotia.org. That's our website, or we're also on Facebook as Fireworks Hurt.
Okay, Dr. Chisholm, appreciate it as always. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Todd.
All right, take care, Dr. Hugh Chisholm of the group Fireworks Hurt. Hateful conduct reports in Canadian military rising after years of decline. Scott Taylor when we come back.
Corporate megastores are spending millions lobbying DC politicians on one-sided policies that send small businesses tumbling. They want to enact harmful credit card mandates that take resources away from your local credit union and community bank, leaving Main Street businesses with less access to credit, making it harder for your family to pay for everyday goods like gas and groceries. Tell Congress to guard your card and oppose the Durbin-Marshall credit card mandates.
Paid for by Electronic Payments Coalition.
I saw this story on the Global News website recently. The Canadian military saw a rise in reported incidents of hateful conduct last year, reversing a years-long trend of declining reports, internal data suggests. The data obtained by Global News from the Department of National Defense has both former military members and outside experts warning of persistent issue of extremism in the Canadian Armed Forces and society at large, despite years of work to confront it. Scott Taylor of Esprit de Corps Magazine joins us to talk about all of this and joins us for a chat. Scott, thanks for doing this today.
Always a pleasure.
All right, so any surprises here? What are your thoughts? What were kind of your broad strokes thoughts on this?
Well, I've read the article and the report. It's a sad reflection on, I think, society and then the world in general, that people are now starting to polarize as much as they are, that these ideologies are going to be in the ranks. People are going to have these ideas, but overall, as an institution, I don't think that we're at a point now where we need to be alarmed. There's been a couple of incidents lately. We've talked about them on this show, about the Blue Hackle Mafia, the Facebook group that brought discredit to the regiment here in Ottawa, and then there's 4 individuals, 2 of whom are currently serving, that got arrested on charges of terrorism in Quebec City, which those are still before the courts, but and there was people had genuine cause for alarm. If we've got people serving in uniform that are charged with terrorism intended against Canada itself, they're supposed to protect Canada from those guys, not to become them. So those have highlighted this issue, and then of course this report saying it's on the rise. But I think if you look at the numbers, the data, it spiked to the highest degree in 2020, which of course was the height of the pandemic, and people driven into their own worlds, even the military, was like they were unable to parade, they were unable to attend work on a regular basis. If they were reservists, etc., they had more free time and they had more access to social media, and obviously these things began to brew then.
Okay, the data comes from the Hateful Conduct Incident Tracking System, established to track incidents reported to the chain of command involving military members. How much of a reflection do you think this is of the true picture?
Well, they're trying to monitor it, which is good news, and this is something which, again, it's a fairly new initiative, and the whole command, the Culture and Conduct Command that was stood up, and Jenny Carignan, the current Chief of Defense Staff, was the commander of that, means they're trying to address this, and this includes sexual misconduct, includes all kinds of activity, which they're still working towards making, I guess, a utopian society, which it never will be. It's the profession of arms, it's people, they've got a job to do, you're bringing them in from all walks of life, you're going to have oddballs and misfits and people that are going to obviously stretch the thing. So again, I think it's partially a comment on society and the world at large of what's going on right now. And again, these guys going into the military, keep in mind the majority still are young men They are looking to be trained into martial arts. They want to learn about weapons, and they don't really have any deep-rooted political ideology. And that's where I think it would be easy to get them to prey upon them for their skill sets, but they would be more interested in the profession of arms, pursuing it. We've had guys that have joined up as adventurers, and then when Canada wasn't deploying on peacekeeping or in Afghanistan, they would go off and become mercenaries or join the Foreign Legion, and they were seeking adventure. They weren't necessarily following any one ideology.
I was in the military, as you know, in the late '80s and into the '90s, yep. And I honestly don't remember extremism. Maybe I'm naive. I don't know, but it's obviously you're gonna, like you said, you're gonna have all walks of life, and you're gonna have aspects of prejudice and all types of things. But I don't remember any extremism to this degree. Is it the online world that is creating this, or what?
We didn't have those access to those things. I mean, you lived as a community back in those days. I was in the early '80s, and you lived in barracks for the most part until if you're lucky enough to get married and move into personnel quarters. Mm-hmm. But you were always part of it on the base. Like you were in a fishbowl. You didn't disappear back into your room and hook up on your computer and join a Facebook group. You went to the mess. You didn't. Things were evident. You couldn't sort of hide those things. We had one guy who expressed an awful lot of anti-Semitism and white supremacy, and they beat the crap out of him. Yeah. I mean, the guy was we tried to beat his ideology out of him because we didn't have an awful lot of visible minorities in our units, but all of us were brothers. I mean, that was your platoon, was your family, and it was, you saw yourself as superior to the civvies, but it was never aimed at anything that was in any way an extremism that I would understand as well.
All right, so the online world, like you said, it's creating these types of. This is not just unique to the military. Obviously, this is happening in the civilian world, to use your term, and so I suppose it would be expected that you would see this happening in the military ranks as well.
Well, and we're seeing it in other ways as well. I mean, I've never seen such a pushback as they had against vaccines and within the military, because they would realize that there's others like them because they could get onto groups and chat on the internet. And there was a huge objection to taking the needles, which, as a soldier, we went through back in our day. We got all kinds of vaccines. We didn't know what they were. Yeah. You lined up, you got jabbed in the arm, and if you were going to go to the first Gulf War, you got 6 inoculations, whether you wanted them or not, and nobody objected to it. And now you had this huge pushback. Guys actually got released from the forces because they refused to take vaccines. So there is, I think, part of this element of social media that allows these guys to communicate and to buck the trends. I mean, people that would resist the change in the hairstyles or the tattoos or things, I mean, people can now communicate with each other in a way which is unseen, basically, unless they're going to start to monitor that stuff, which would go against Canadian values.
How do the leadership ranks deal with this, and how are they dealing with it?
Well, they're trying. I mean, this is the thing, is there's only so much they can invade the privacy of these individuals. They have to be allowed to have their own rights and whatever, they have their own thoughts. They're not allowed to be political. I mean, they're not allowed to be in uniform showing support for any political party, or certainly not going to any rallies or communicating with white supremacists or these things. Mm-hmm. And again, there's only so much they can do to monitor that if indeed it's not as evident. I mean, obviously these guys in Quebec City were trying to recruit others, and that's how they inevitably got tripped up, because enough people said they don't agree with that and that shouldn't be happening, and now they've notified the authorities. So hopefully that will remain the case, that this will be the minority, the tiny minority, as opposed to anything near a majority within our ranks.
All right. So I suppose when it comes to this issue in general, will it be a top-down approach to solving it, or will it kind of be from within the ranks and more organic, or what do you think? What do you think is the most powerful way to stem the tide here? I
think it is peer pressure. I mean, and it is, what do you call it? Imperative upon everybody to be on the watch for this. It's not going to be somebody's going to come down. It's like if you're seeing something, you report it. Back in my day or your day.
Yeah.
It was illegal to be homosexual. It was illegal to take any kind of drugs. It was, and there was pressure from people in the ranks. You didn't want anybody else to be a pothead because you were going to be out using live ammunition.
Yeah.
So that it didn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that those people shouldn't be serving alongside of you.
Mm-hmm.
Now that it's been legalized and the rules have changed, it's a different story. But society has changed a lot. But back in those days, it was peer pressure that the soldiers wanted to be better than the average individual. They felt they were prideful in who they were. So let's hope we can restore that.
Scott, always great. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Take care.
All right, you got a Scott Taylor of Esprit de Corps Magazine. More than half of Canadians want cuts to the federal public service. We'll discuss this with Franco Terrazzano when we come back.
Thanks.
More than half of Canadians think the size and cost of the federal public service should be reduced in the coming years, a new Leger poll says. The poll indicates that 54% of respondents want the federal bureaucracy cut, 24% want it maintained, 4% say it should get bigger. The poll suggests 17% of respondents were not sure what should happen. Franco Terrazzano, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation Federal Director, joined us to talk about all of this. Franco, thanks for joining the show.
Hey, Todd. Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
You guys commissioned the poll here, did you?
Yes, we did. Yep.
Oh, okay. All right. So, any surprises here?
Well, yeah. I mean, there are, I don't know about surprises, but there's definitely some good news for taxpayers in here, right? So the bad news is that the bureaucracy in Ottawa has grown out of control, and we're all paying the price for it with higher tax bills. I mean, look, the government added 99,000 extra bureaucrats since 2016. 99,000 extra government employees is what taxpayers are paying for. But it's not just the number of bureaucrats that increased, the cost did too, right? So since 2016, the cost of the federal bureaucracy grew 77%. Now, I mentioned that there's some good news in the polling. I mean, the polling shows that more than half of Canadians, as you mentioned, want the government to cut the size and cost of bureaucracy. When you remove the undecideds, that jumps up to 66% of Canadians are saying, look, enough is enough. It's time to cut the size and cost of the bureaucracy. So, I'm hoping that the Carney government will look at these polls and they will know that Canadians want them to shed the fat over there in Ottawa.
All right. So tell us about the size of the public sector and how it's grown, and I guess give everybody some details as to what we're dealing with when it comes to the size.
Well, I mean, it's grown significantly, right? As I mentioned, 99,000 extra government employees. Look, the bureaucracy, just the number, not the cost, the number grew more than double the population of Canada, or how the population grew, right? So think about it this way. If the bureaucracy had just grown in line with population growth over the last decade, taxpayers would be saving about $7 billion every single year. But of course, it's not just the number, it's also the cost, because we've seen, significant amount of pay raises going to federal employees. We've also seen $1.5 billion in bonuses handed out since 2015, right? So the cost to taxpayers of the federal bureaucracy in 2016 was $40 billion. The cost in 2024 jumped all the way up to about $71 billion. As I mentioned, right, the cost of the bureaucracy went up 77% since 2016. And, the thing that I like to tell Canadians, or just, plant the seed, is ask yourself this question. Has federal services improved by 77% since 2016 because the federal bureaucracy has grown that much?
All right. So when it comes to services, we're talking here passports, we're talking CRA. What type of services impact people's daily lives?
Well, and Todd, the second polling question that we had Leger ask Canadians, I think is a very important one, right? The Leger asked Canadians, look, the size and cost of bureaucracy has ballooned over the decade. Well, do you think federal services have kept pace? And Todd, now this is quite surprising. Half of Canadians said that no, services have actually gotten worse, right? So you've seen this ballooning tab in the bureaucracy, and yet half of Canadians say services have not gotten better. They haven't stayed the same. Half of Canadians say services have gotten worse. In fact, only 11% of Canadians, think about that, only 11% of Canadians say that services have gotten better, but even a huge chunk of those people acknowledge that, but services should still be better given how much the cost is going up. So, I mentioned that question off the top. Are you getting 77% better services from the federal bureaucracy? And I think Canadians are saying a big fat no to that.
Okay, so when it comes to Mark Carney and what he said, he's looking at 15% reductions, asking for ministers to come up with reductions of 15% across the board. What are your thoughts on that initiative?
Well, yeah, what are my thoughts? I mean, first of all, the government does have to cut spending, right? Like, our debt is a serious issue here where interest charges on the debt are costing taxpayers more than $1 billion every single week. And remember, folks, like, what can $1 billion pay for? That's a brand new hospital that is not getting built every single week because that money is going to pay interest charges on the debt. So the government does have to cut spending. Now, to your question about, Carney's review, I hope they cut spending, but I got to give you the answer that I'll believe it when I see it. Because, we've heard this from the government before recently, where in budget 2023, the federal government says it's going to find $15 billion in savings. But the next year, it ended up increasing spending by about $25 billion. So, when you're increasing spending by $25 billion in 1 year, you're saving money wrong.
Yeah, for sure. How much of a wedge issue is this politically, do you think?
How much of a wedge issue? That's a great question. And the honest answer is I'm not sure, because I haven't heard really any political party, jump to the front here and say, taxpayers deserve better and a leaner federal bureaucracy. I haven't heard any of the parties in the House of Commons actually be like, yes, we got to fire and cut back significantly the number of federal bureaucrats. So to answer your question, how much of a wedge issue, I'm not sure, because I haven't heard a vocal opposition from any of the parties in the House of Commons saying, we got to save taxpayers a bunch of money and we got to trim the fat.
Okay, what about those who argue that a public sector, a robust public sector, is good for the economy because it's good paying jobs and good for low? And look, if you live in certain communities like Charlottetown and other areas, certainly here in Halifax, where there's a robust public sector, it's hard to deny that it's good economically. At least it appears to be so. What's your response to those who suggest that a large public sector is good for local economies?
Well, number one, I would say the government is not meant to be, or the government bureaucracy is not meant to be a jobs program, right? The government bureaucracy or the federal government or any government is there to serve taxpayers, right? That's the whole point of government, is to deliver services for taxpayers. And I would say that, look, clearly this poll shows that adding more government bureaucrats doesn't mean better services for Canadians, where the cost of the government bureaucracy went up 77% in a decade. And yet Canadians, like half of us, are saying that services are actually worse, not better. So that's what I would say, number one. Number two, though, right, like, remember all the money that is going into the federal bureaucracy, about $70 billion every single year, all that money isn't falling from the tree. It's not falling from the sky, right? That money is also taken out of the economy first, taken from small businesses, medium businesses, right? Money that should be left in the hands of job creators to employ more of their workers in the neighborhood. So remember, folks, the money that's used to pay for the bureaucracy, it's not falling from the sky. It's taken out of the economy in the first place.
Yeah, but do you feel as though that there's this kind of attitude out there that when it comes to government debt, that people are becoming immune to it almost? There's an indifference when it comes to public debt. What are your thoughts?
Well, I have a couple thoughts on this. Number one is I think there's a growing concern among Canadians outside of the political class that something has to be done, right? When you look at your total tax bill to all level of government, it is more than 40% of the average family's income. Right, like that's crazy. Canadians are struggling to get by, and almost half of their paycheck, when you look at all the different taxes, is going to a level of government, right? So that's getting crazy, and I know Canadians are really struggling with affordability right now. But the second point is too, right? I think everyone wants to leave their kids and their grandkids a better financial future. Well, a kid today born is already on the hook for about $30,000 in federal government debt. Like that is a huge tax bill that is coming down the line if federal politicians don't roll up their sleeves and save some money. So I think Canadians are really want our politicians to do a better job with fiscal restraint. But over the last decade or so, the politicians have been kind of ignoring the $1 trillion elephant in the room that is the federal debt.
Franco, always great. Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Hey, Todd, thanks for having me on.
All right, take care. Franco Terrazzano, Canadian Taxpayers Federation Federal Director. Now, what is on your mind today? Give us a call at 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. The Premier of the province yesterday says an assessment done after the 2023 wildfires found the province's firefighting helicopters were sufficient for the vast majority of wildfires in Nova Scotia. And he says the help from New Brunswick, when it comes to the Bears Lake fires this week, Bears Lake fire, a day after Nova Scotia sent a crew there to help fight fires, shows the coordinated response between provinces is working. Is this acceptable in your opinion? Is this an acceptable response? At a time when we are told that this is the new norm, and it appears as though that there's good evidence to suggest that these are the conditions we're going to be dealing with for many years to come. Is it acceptable that we have no water bombers here in Nova Scotia? Because basically the Premier said that that's the case. He said we don't need water bombers. That's basically what he said. I don't know how you can make that claim based on everything that we're going through and based on everything that we're seeing. So do we have to? Is now they talk about planting a tree, the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago or 20 years ago, but besides from that, it's now. And that's the case with this as well. The time to try and procure water bombers was years ago, but we didn't do that, so is now the best time? Do we just simply say we have to start the process? Or do you agree with the Premier that we can rely on other provinces to supply water bombers when needed? And the 4 helicopters is sufficient, again, according to this assessment done after the 2023 wildfires. What are your thoughts on that or anything else that you have in your mind? I get some other things here in the pile as well. 902-405-6000. That is the way to get a hold of us. Again, 902-405-6000. Your calls when we come back.
DC politicians want to enact harmful credit card mandates that could take away your cash back and rewards points. Perks that stretch your budget and make life a little easier. Losing these benefits means less money for your family's everyday essentials like gas and groceries. The perks you rely on could disappear, leaving you with higher costs and fewer options. Tell Congress to guard your card and oppose the Durbin-Marshall credit card mandates.
Paid for by Electronic Payments Coalition.
All right. Give us a call if you'd like to have your say. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Premier Tim Houston yesterday says an assessment done after the 2023 wildfires found the province's firefighting 4 helicopters were sufficient for the vast majority of wildfires in Nova Scotia, and went on to say that help from New Brunswick, a day after Nova Scotia sent a crew there to help fight fires, shows the coordinated response between provinces is working. What are your thoughts on this, folks? I would say that I think logically, would we prefer to have would it be better if we had fixed-wing water bombers here in Nova Scotia? And I think that it's hard to say no. How do you say no? It wouldn't be that what we have is sufficient. When in fact we just needed water bombers, right? Water bombers made a massive difference with the Suzie Lake fire. It made a huge difference. Who knows what would have happened if not for those water bombers contributing to that effort. People who witnessed it, including Dan Alstrand, of course, who reported on it, said that the helicopters were, the difference between what the helicopter can do and what a plane can do is it's not even in the same category. So, look, folks, I realize that governments in the past have kicked us down the road, including the previous Liberal government and the NDP government before that. I get it. But at some point, the buck stops with the government of the day. And you have to, at some point, say we need to start the procurement process. And if it takes 5, 6, 7, 8 years to get fixing water bombers, then that's what it takes, because dragging our heels and pretending we don't need them is not the answer, in my opinion. And basically that's what this is. This is political cover. You're citing an assessment done after the 2023 wildfires, and to me that's political cover. I see no other way around it. So, Mr. Premier, start the process. Bite the bullet. It doesn't matter what the cost at this point. We're told that this is the new normal, and there's every reason to believe that it is. Let's get it going. What are your thoughts on this, folks? 902-405-6000 or whatever else you've got on your mind. Also, look, folks, I understand why some people read a story like this next one, and get frustrated. And it's I saw it on the Global News website today. As the heat wave continues to produce conditions ripe for fires and blaze burning in the area, some golf clubs in Nova Scotia have introduced new restrictive smoking policies. Both the Paragon Golf and Country Club in Kingston and Granite Springs Golf Club in Bayside, for example, have issued letters to guests warning of the ban. One of the letters on Facebook page simply says, "Smoking is banned. The Granite Springs course allows some smokers to partake in the habit near a designated point near a cart washing station." So, look, folks, at a time when we're told stay out of the woods, everybody's categorically stay out of the woods. And to the degree where there's massive fines, and you could debate that or not. But when this is the government policy, how are we allowing people to recreate on golf courses, which snake in many cases well into the woods, heavily wooded areas, and anybody familiar with cart paths know that they wind right along wooded areas in many cases. And we all know that golfers, anybody who golfs will tell you that golfers love to smoke cigars. Many golfers smoke cigarettes. Many golfers smoke marijuana. And is this fair? Is this inherently unfair to allow some recreational activities like golf to continue, and while others are restricted? And I would suggest that there's a disconnect here. 902-405-6000, that or whatever else you've got in your mind. Again, 902-405-6000. That is the way to get a hold of us. Let's kick it off with Paul. Hello, Paul.
Yes. Hi, Todd. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
Yeah, Todd, I wanted to just maybe make your listeners aware of the crisis that we're seeing in healthcare. And it's not just an issue of people waiting to get to see a doctor or waiting for surgery. There's a level of incompetence and mismanagement in our healthcare system that's reached a crisis, so that people today in the Halifax infirmary are in some cases dying of horrible things like diabetic ketoacidosis they develop in the hospital because they're not receiving their insulin, acute kidney injury because their fluids aren't being managed, sepsis because they're not getting proper antibiotics for urinary infections. And it's just reached a level of incompetence that we've never seen before.
Mm. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And again, the personal stories that are out being played out because of this it's hard to understate, right?
Well, it's tragic. It really is. And I don't think the public is aware of how bad it is. And I think a lot of this is mismanagement and incompetence within our healthcare system. And there's some wonderful people, don't get me wrong. We have some amazing doctors and nursing professionals. But it's just reached a level. If you talk with people who are working in the profession, they will tell you about these disasters that unfold on a daily basis. Doctors not listening to nurses or making incompetent calls. I mean, it's just reached a level that's horrifying.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, Paul, appreciate the call.
And at the same time, can I mention one other thing?
Sure.
That is the allocation of resources we have. I mean, the fact that we have more than, I would say, 1 to 200 patients in our healthcare system today perpetually in the hospitals who are opiate addicts. The amount of resources that they drain from the system is it's unethical, the amount of money we're spending on these individuals.
Okay, Paul, appreciate the call. Take care. 902-405-6000. George, hello.
Morning, sir. Thank you for taking my phone call.
Sure.
I want to add a little more to what Peter had to say yesterday. He gave you an excellent report on the helicopter crew that was used to be able to go to fires right away. Back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, he mentioned the fire towers. We had one in each county. They were located, at least one in each county. They were located on the highest elevations in that area. They ranged anywhere from 30, 40 feet up to 100 feet. Most of them were around 100 feet, which is as high as a 10-story building. And you could spot smoke probably 20, 25 miles away quite easily. And these people were well trained. If they saw a smoke, they called in the nearest DNR office, told them where they thought it was. If they could get an opinion from another fire tower, they do the same thing. And the fire tower, and then the DNR office, we had 4 water bombers, 4 small water bombers located in the province. One was at McGowan Lake in Queens County, one was at Waverly, one was at Garda of Eden in Pictou County, and one was down at Cape Breton. These water bombers held about 145 gallons of water, and they were immediately dispatched to the fire, and they stayed there on that fire, water bombing, until the ground crew got there, and if they were requested to stay longer, they would stay there longer. And I don't know. They did away with the fire tower thing. They did away with the water bomber thing, and I realize that they're not as big in capacity as the larger ones, but they certainly were very, very effective in fighting fires. And there are 3 things that I would like to recommend and that we've been trying to do for years now. And I'm in the forest industry. I had people working there. I'd much rather have them working in the woods than would have them not working there, because a lot of our land adjoins lakes, and we've seen the residuals of campfires. And if my people are there, they've got the fire gear and they've got an excavator and so on and so forth. But anyway, there are 3 things. Number 1, I'd like to see them bring back these 4 small fire bombers. Number 2, and for years we've been after the government of the day to bring in at least 1, if not 2, large fire bombers like you have advocated. And number 3, I'd like to see the Air Force get involved, because I think they could do quite a bit to fight some of these fires, but I don't think they have ever been approached. They're in the air, they're patrolling all the time, and I really think they could be a big asset toward this. Now, those basically are my recommendations, and I'll give you a little bit of history of what went on in the past.
Okay.
Well, I guess that's all I can add. I mean, like I say, we had firefighter suppression back then than we have right now. With the helicopters are good, but the only advantage of a helicopter is they can get water out of a pond, whereas a plane has to go to a lake or a river or something like that.
That's right.
We're inundated with lakes in this province, and we're very, very blessed that way. We've got thousands of lakes all over the province.
Yeah, I think a helicopter has a role, and we've got 4 of them. But to suggest that we don't need water bombers, I think is disingenuous, and it's not factual either. I think I think logically,
like we had them years ago, and
exactly,
they were extremely effective in fighting fires. And unfortunately, the government of the day apparently didn't feel that. Well, I don't think they supported the forest industry the way it should have been supported. But anyway.
Well, government's kicked this down the road, and this is the problem, George, is that but at some point, the government of the day is the government that's responsible for the policy, and the government needs to get off its duff and order start the procurement process. I know it's expensive. I know it's going to take time, but now's the time to start, right?
Well, I agree with you, but I mean, look at the situation that if all these other water bombers were tied up in their own provinces, and none of them could come here, we might have to go as far as up to Washington or Oregon or somewhere down the States to bring one up. I mean, that cost would just be magnanimous.
And the time that it would take as well, of course, right, to get them.
And, I mean, these could be rented out to other provinces and help them out. But No, we've been trying for years to get a large water bomber, but unfortunately the government of the day doesn't think it's important enough.
Right. Okay, George. Appreciate the call.
But thank you very much for carrying this on, and you're doing a good job. Keep up the good work.
Thanks a lot. Take care. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back.
Facts.
902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Quick email suggests that it sounds like Monday morning quarterback regarding water bombers. Well, okay, fine, whatever. But look, folks, at some point you have to admit the fact that the province needs water bombers. It's not Monday morning quarterback. It's realistic. I mean, if we didn't need them, we wouldn't have had them. We needed them on this week, and they made a big difference. Could have made all the difference when it comes to the Susie's Lake fire. So it's pretty evident that we need these things, in my opinion, and I think it's pretty evident. It's logical. To suggest that some assessment done after the recent 10 Talon wildfires says that fixed wing or helicopters are sufficient, I just think it's political cover. This is my take, as I always say. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Nick's giving us a call. Hello, Nick.
Hey, good morning. How you doing?
I'm well. You?
Doing well. Yeah, that last caller nailed it. I grew up there near a fire tower there up Caledonia. He had his own plane with him. He had 40 years experience. The guy was awesome. And not only that, again with the water bombers, he'd team up, tip off the wing to him, and he'd be head back looking for more. And that fire there, I live in New Germany now. I'm about 30 kilometers from that West Dalhousie, and I went to bed. They said, oh, yeah, bye, we'll check on her in the morning. That water bomber could have been hitting that all night. There's 2 lakes, both sides of fire. And, I think we should hold the government accountable, get better infrastructure, and less bans. That's all I got to say.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
All right. Appreciate the call. Take care. 902-405-6000. Barry, hello.
Hi, Todd. I agree with you 100%, and I'm glad you're bringing this to the forefront. I think I sent you an email. They're making these new de Havilland 515s in Calgary, and there's a lot of orders been placed, but we're way behind. But like you say, we should get the orders in. Manitoba has already ordered 3, but we've got to do much better than what we're doing because things are only going to get worse.
Yeah, I mean, dragging our heels and kicking the can down the road and pretending that we don't need them is not the answer.
No, and our helicopters carry 150-gallon bags under them, but these new water bombers carry 1,500, which is twice as much. And they're travel a lot faster as well.
Yeah. You're talking about the planes, right?
Yeah, the de Havilland 515s.
Right. Okay, Barry, thanks for the email, by the way. I saw that. Interesting. Thanks.
Okay, no problem.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. Cameron, hello.
Hi, good morning. Listen, I really enjoy listening to your show. This is my first time calling in. And I guess my point is listening to you talking about the bombers is I totally agree because for 2 points. One is the Premier even said himself that response time is important. So I think yesterday in his press release, he said 25 minutes or less, and in these conditions, 5 minutes or less. So what if those bombers in New Brunswick weren't available because, God forbid, their fires are reaching residential areas? We already know the Newfoundland, what they're going through, and they can't send help like they did in 2023. So if he's talking about response time, that's one issue right there. Second, he also said that part of the ban is because that Nova Scotia is the second most dense wooded area in the country.
Right.
Well, my stars, if that alone isn't enough for us to strategically place bombers throughout Nova Scotia, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
Like,
absolutely.
At the end of the day, right, if they're worried about cost, then they need to go back and look at their books. I worked for a company once that did a project, they called it Project Simplify. First, it was a bunch of executives sitting around a boardroom saying, how can we save money? Then when they went to execute it, they realized that it failed. But when they listened to the people that are on the ground, that have boots on the ground and are walking the walk, they turned it around and it became a very successful Project Simplify, and it saved their company tens of millions of dollars. this government needs to listen to your show, because I love listening to your callers that have the expertise because they worked it. They lived it. And the government is worried about, saving money. Well, when they go on these trips around the world, showcasing Nova Scotia, they're spending thousands of dollars on hotel rooms. You know what? Do you need to? Do you need to go to five-star restaurants to impress a person you want them to invest in the province? Like, let the province sell itself. So that's on that. And on the bike lanes, I'm not a biker. I don't know the rules, but I do know this. I was downtown on Saturday, took my wife out on the Harbor Hopper, and we got diverted down South Park Street, and a fire truck with his lights and sirens on couldn't get down the road because a bus was coming up and people were parked out too far from the curb. It's just a disaster. So I just hope they go back to the whiteboard, plan it out, and do it right.
Okay, Cameron, appreciate the call.
All right, take care.
All right, take
Bye.
care. 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Again, I think you made some excellent points, right? Response times, the Premier said that yesterday. Response times are critical, okay? So what about a response time? Well, if you've got fixed-wing aircraft and that capability, that's going to improve that if you've got it locally. And here and our own resources. And like he said, most densely populated, forested area in the country. Well, there's another reason to have water bombers. To me, to say that we don't need them is just foolish. And it doesn't make any sense. 902-405-6000. Now is the time. Now is the time to begin the procurement process, because we're just going to be 5, 6, 7 years later and we'll be having these same conversations. And it'll be a different government, of course, then, likely, and it'll be the same thing. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back.
Corporate megastores are spending millions lobbying D.C. politicians on one-sided policies that send small businesses tumbling. They want to enact harmful credit card mandates that take resources away from your local credit union and community bank, leaving Main Street businesses with less access to credit, making it harder for your family to pay for everyday goods like gas and groceries. Tell Congress to guard your card and oppose the Durbin-Marshall credit card mandates.
Paid for by Electronic Payments Coalition.
All right, continuing with your calls. The way to reach us is 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Peter's giving us a call. Hello, Peter.
Good morning, Todd.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, there was a gentleman called in there with that information in regards to fire towers and those 4 small water bombers that the province had, and he beat me to it, actually. That was that I had forgot about, because I think all of those planes were left probably in the 80s or maybe in the early 90s. And at that time, the department had natural resources, and I was working for them then. They did an assessment, and the reality of it is that they made a determination, just because of the geography in Nova Scotia and the amount of small ponds and the rest of it, that helicopters were the most practical solution to the budgets that they were dealing with. And then every year while I was fighting fires for the province over 29 years, we were always told that if you don't use the biggest helicopter, 212, that the province would take it away. And so they did that in the Helitac team, and they did that in 2012. So it's not just that the province needs a water bomber. And that water bomber, people need to understand, if it's purchased and it's set up somewhere, ideally, hopefully we never need to use it at all, but it can be loaned out to other provinces. The upside of helicopters is when they're not being used just for fire, they're used for multiple other tasks around the province, and they're by far and away the most versatile. The problem is that the province just ordered 4 new helicopters, and the 2023 assessment, after fire assessment, was inaccurate, because when they're saying that those 4 helicopters will suffice, what they forgot to mention was that if they would have had the Bell 212 and the Helitac team, we might not have had that 60,000-acre fire grow to be that big down in Shelburne. I looked at that data afterwards because I'm also a forest fire investigator. Mm-hmm. And it appears that the Helitac team may, given those conditions, we may have already had helicopters stationed down in that area. And the 212 is the emergency response attack team for forest fires in the province, especially in remote areas. They were the guys that when I was fighting fires for the province that we relied on in remote areas to land on the ground, set up initial attack, and in many cases they were fighting fires for up to an hour before we could get there with ground crews. And when Tim Houston says it's critical that we get rapid response, you cannot get rapid response without a heli-attack team in this province. And so all the bigger provinces in Canada have heli-attack teams. Anybody who deals with fires on an ongoing basis, and especially with Nova Scotia geography, most people in Nova Scotia aren't aware right now. Right now, we have no fire coverage for the province. We have no towers. We have no people in the woods with cell phones. Anybody that's in the woods using with permits that are doing any type of construction or woods work, their permits prohibit them from having a smartwatch or a cell phone with them. So basically, we have nobody in this province right now. If they see smoke somewhere, that are going to, if they're traveling, for example, if they were traveling on a wooded road through the woods, they can call it in. But when the fire tower system was shut down, Todd, the number one reason that the province justified removing that tower system was that with the advent of everybody in the province having cell phones, that they would be able to rely on those people for the province's early warning system for fires. And now none of those same people are allowed in the woods. And my understanding is, I'm trying to get data from Fire Control or whether or not they're doing daily flights with fixed-wing aircraft for fire patrols, because that's something else we used to do. We used to be able to say, given these conditions, even with the tower, there's some areas that, in a valley, we might not spot the smoke right away. So we're going to have we used to call it bird dogging. And, you'd have these small fixed-wing planes, and the province can actually even rent those and do those today. I'm not sure if they're doing it as of today, but I have to agree that if we were to get a bomber, bigger aircraft with bigger capacity, that hopefully we'd have it and actually never use it. But people need to understand that the helicopters that we have now, we had a helicopter, that 212 had more lift capacity. It could move a 5-man team with all their fire crew. They were the tip of the spear, and the tip of that spear is gone. And the province knew about it. The premier knew about it, and they ordered new helicopters. And after 2023, decided, we might not use it as much as we want, but we got it wrong in 2012, but we're not going to correct the error now. And one other point I'd like to make too, Todd, I had a buddy of mine over off of Kearney Lake Road when the fire was going outside of Halifax here the other day. And he was looking for help for me to come over and help him with his property. He had a pump and a fire hose, and he was soaking everything down. And I actually couldn't go over and help the guy out because it's his property, not mine. And if I was soaking down along the edge of the woods in there, technically I was in the woods, and I would have got a $28,000 fine for trying to help a friend from keeping his house burning down.
Yeah.
Anyways,
interesting comments. Thanks for the call.
You got it.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. Mike, hello.
Hey, how are you today?
Well, you?
Not bad. My thing is about the water bomber as well. Why couldn't the province partner with the D&D and get a fleet of bombers and stage them across Canada? We have a whole airfield down there in Shearwater with those new helicopters that are do nothing. You can't sling a basket underneath to drop water. I don't understand all this. It's every helicopter in the province should be utilized, period.
Yeah, somebody mentioned that yesterday. A retired helicopter pilot said the same thing, and I think that the only I guess barrier would be getting the federal government to authorize that, because obviously with it being military equipment and military resources, the federal government. But I agree that seems to be logically would make sense to me.
And another thing is Trump is down there screaming about us upping our ante to 5% of for the
GDP
thing. Yeah. So if we bought water bombers and staged them and the military ran them, well, wouldn't that contribute to that and solve a problem in Canada as well?
Yeah,
if you need 20 bombers out in the West Coast, well, then you take 20 And if you see Nova Scotia getting all dried out here, well, then bring one back or so, right?
Yep. No, I think that makes sense, Mike. I think that's a valid point. And I think at this point, every option needs to be explored because things are dire, and we know that, and we need to explore every option possible, including what you're advocating for and suggesting. I think it's a good idea.
And it gives the military pilots experience at low-level bombing.
Yeah.
You know, if worse come to worse, right?
Yep. No, I think it's an interesting concept, Mike. Thanks for the call.
All right, have a good day.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. Scott, hello.
Morning, Todd.
Hi there.
You got me?
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, my comments are going to almost be kind of similar to the D&D one of your last caller. I was going to say, why can't the four Atlantic provinces get together with the governments and get the feds involved and get these aircraft that we need desperately for when we need them and share them, and then for our own Atlantic provinces to start with, and then they can go and be help for other places to do when they have this kind of thing happen to them. What do you think?
Yeah, no, look, I think we need to explore all options at this point because we're up against it, and if we've got resources and we can pool resources, including the military resources and military spending, I think a coordinated approach definitely makes sense. It's hard to argue against that, Scott, but to me, I go back to what the Premier said yesterday, suggesting that we don't need water bombers here in the province because of this assessment done after the 2023 wildfires, saying that the 4 helicopters are sufficient. That, to me, that is not logical, and it's political cover, in my opinion.
No, and he looked tired the other day. He looked tired when he was on the news talking about all this stuff. So he's losing sleep over it by the looks.
Yeah.
So I can't understand why somebody can't tug his coattails and wake him up a little bit, because this is going to happen again and again and again. This is not going to stop.
No, it's not. And at some point, we're going to be, I mean, look, like, it's a good thing we had those resources, those water bombers, on loan from New Brunswick, because who knows what might have happened if not.
Right. So maybe if we had, each province had one,
yeah,
you know, then you can share, but you'd at least have one in every province, because Newfoundland's got a lot of woods up there.
Yeah.
New Brunswick's got a lot of woods. PEI doesn't, but still, they're going to need help one day too. And and it always seems that we're relying on somebody else to help us.
Yeah, that's
true.
That?
Like the United States, the bombers from Quebec, bombers from New Brunswick. You know what? It's all adding up.
Absolutely. Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it.
Thanks for
all right. Take care. 902-405-6000. Give us a call, folks. What is on your mind? We get some open lines for you and get some time for you as well. Again, 902-405-6000. What are your thoughts on this or anything else you've got in your mind? Again, 902-405-6000. Your calls continue when we come back. 902-405-6000. That's the way to get a hold of us. Again, 902-405-6000. Dennis, hello.
Yeah, hello. Yes, so I'm also commenting about the water bomber, and I agree with you. I think it's time that we get on with it. So I've been doing some research, and the price of one of those big scooper, the CL415, is around $30 million, if the information online is correct. And that's about the price of 6 or 7 of the smaller water bomber, the air tractor. So the math is pretty simple just on the acquisition and the capacity of carrying water. The smaller, the AT802, carries half of what the big scooper can carry. But you can get 6 or 7, depending on how you equip them, a smaller bomber. So you get the same capacity and you get 2 aircraft instead of just 1 for the same amount of water.
Right.
Also, the cost of operating them will be less, because the bigger aircraft, because that's the other things that we have to put into amount, how much does it cost to operate those aircraft? You need 2 pilots, at least. There might even be a technician to look after the water equipment in the back, where the air tractor, you only have 1 pilot, that's it. Right? So the cost of operating and acquiring it is a lot less. So with all the comment that we got today on your show and yesterday, very good comment, it seemed to me that we already have that cooperation with other provinces. We had assistance from Quebec, from New Brunswick. So there's already have an agreement. They have the big scooper. Maybe Nova Scotia, we could look at and say, hey, how about we buy those smaller water bomber. We can get 6 of them for the price of one of the big scooper. We can spread them across the province, and we can even loan them to other province. Right. The advantage to those, beside the operating cost, is that they are they need less length to pick up the water, because the bigger airplane needs a larger lake to be able to scoop up the water, so they can operate in an area where the big scooper cannot, right? So I think that's something that we should look at and say, you know what, yeah, we need, like your last caller and the one before that said, we need to have the helicopter because they provide other capability that fixed-wing aircraft cannot, like putting fire crews on a remote location. So we need to have a mix, and I think the province could get a mix. We could get water bomber, capability without, getting to the huge cost of buying one of those big scooper aircraft. What do you think?
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, like I said, I think every option needs to be explored, but to suggest we don't need fixed-wing airplane is to me just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. The only problem with my scenario is that the air tractor is made in the States. So with the elbow up campaign, it might not be something we want to do. But to me, it's a no-brainer. We need to look at fixed-wing aircraft and what is the best option for Nova Scotia.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, good comments. Thanks, Dennis.
Yep.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. Chris, hello.
Good morning. Todd, I brought up just what the other guy was just talking about a minute ago there about the air tractor. That's the one I was talking about yesterday on the phone or on the line with you. And, yeah, they're made in the States, but their Canadian distributor is in High Bluff, Manitoba. Northwest Territories uses 14 of these things, and everything the other caller said is absolutely correct. They cost fully loaded, fully equipped, $5 million Canadian. But the big thing is the orders only take from 14 to 18 months to get them.
Right.
And that's what I was bringing up yesterday was this plane. I've researched it a lot more since that. And they only take between 12 and 15 seconds to refill. They're able to go over smaller bodies of water. A lot of these bigger planes have to return to the airport wherever they came from to fill with retardant and so on.
Yeah.
I watched a video that showed 3 or 4 of these little air tractors, the Fire Boss, all on the same lake at the same time, filling in unison, and it was amazing to watch. And like the other guy said, they carry about half the amount of water that the bigger ones do. Require one pilot, much cheaper to operate, and so on. And they could be deployed all over the province in various areas because they only need a small runway or no runway at all because they are also amphibious. So that's something I think they should be looking at. Much more bang for the buck. That's what I made the comparison yesterday, or I was trying to, between governments willing to spend $100 million on bike lanes when you could, for the same amount of money, buy, now it's a different jurisdiction's money, of course, but you could buy 20 of these air tractor planes. That's what they should be looking at. Not to say that they shouldn't investigate also the bigger ones. Maybe there's a use for them too, collaboratively or among the provinces, but it seems like a no-brainer to me at $5 million a pop, 14 to 18 months to get instead of like 6 or 7 years to get a bunch of these and deploy them in various areas around the province.
No, I think it makes some sense, Chris. I think at this point we need to look at all options and best options, and there needs to be a sense of urgency, right? And if this gives us some more capability quicker, then perhaps it's worth looking at.
Well, Todd, it's like you made a comment yesterday about if your roof is leaking, you don't renovate your kitchen or your bathroom or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, what are you going to do? You call the big roofing contractor, and he says, I'm booked up for a year. I can't fix you for a year. And the small guy says, I can come in next week and do it. Where are you going to go?
Yeah, that's right.
You know, and I mean, 14 to 18 months is a livable. It'll be here a hell of a lot sooner than what we think. It doesn't take long for 14 or 18 months to go by. We're going to be in the same situation again. And actually, this company, Portage Aircraft Specialists in Manitoba, they also deal in used equipment as well. Maybe they've got some of them immediately that you could buy at a real cheap price that are good used equipment. And they might be sitting there on their lots right now. Who knows?
Yeah. Okay, Chris, good comments.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for the call. 902-405-6000. Chris, hello.
Morning, Todd.
Hi there.
How you doing today?
I'm doing well, you?
Oh, for an old fella, not bad. My heart specialist thinks I might live a few more years, so.
That's good.
Yeah, I think, to my mind, I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but to my mind, the biggest problem that we got in Nova Scotia is our governments with things like this. They're so reactive instead of proactive. Like, they've known that this has been getting worse, steadily worse, the forest fire situation. The woods in general have been getting worse year after year after year. And instead of actually going out and doing something to help the forests, they would rather just put on a punitive ban in the woods. But they don't even do that properly because our ball field's shut down because there's woods nearby, but yet you can go golfing. You can't go for a walk on the trail, but you got logging companies in there destroying the forest. There's nothing. It just doesn't seem like they've got any direction when it comes to saving the forest and ensuring that the forest can survive these droughts. Anybody that knows anything about the forest knows that it's the hardwoods that cool the forest down. It's not the fir trees. It's not they don't do anything to cool the forest down. They don't do anything for soil retention. They do nothing. And now for how many years I know that guys like Ray Plord, Bob Bancroft, and others who are accredited, who know what they're talking about, have been telling the government that this practice of clear cutting and spraying the hardwoods to kill them off is absolutely destructive. It doesn't do anything good for the forest. And it's not a liberal thing or a conservative thing or an NDP thing. It's a government thing, it seems, in this province. Like, look at McNeil. Okay, when he was in power, the Leahy report, that cost us a lot of money, the taxpayers, to get that report. And I'll bet you it's still propping up somebody's uneven table leg in their office. Nothing's been done about it. And the warning bells were there. People have been sounding the alarms that our forests are becoming monoculture softwoods plantations.
Yeah.
And these things are a tinderbox waiting to happen. And now for our premier to say that we don't need a water bomber is absolutely ludicrous. And that's what I mean, Todd. They don't do anything proactive. They would rather just go, let's put a ban on and we're going to stop forest fires from happening. And to me, that's so retrograde thinking that it's just we're going to be in this situation for summers to come. So I think it's time that we get somebody in there that's willing to do something for the forest and understand that you can't destroy the forest and not have backlash. So that's my thoughts on it.
Okay, Chris, appreciate the call. Take care.
Take care.
All right, you got it. And look, it's hard to disagree with anything that he said. And again, for the premier yesterday to suggest that we don't need water bombers, to me, that's political cover, I guess. I don't know how else to describe it or what that was my thought. I mean, it's pretty evident we need them. We needed them this week. And for all the reasons why we've been discussing, response time, a densely populated area with woods all around us. I mean, it's pretty evident that we would be much better off with fixed wing water bombers than the 4 helicopters that we have. But again, governments kick this thing down the road, and this is the result. And we see this time and time again with many things. But once you're dealing with it front and center, then suddenly it becomes evident, unfortunately. When it comes to your rights and government travel bans and wood bans, what does the charter have to say? What rights do you actually have? We'll talk about this with Wayne MacKay when we come back.
Corporate megastores are spending millions lobbying DC politicians on one-sided policies that send small businesses tumbling. They want to enact harmful credit card mandates that take resources away from your local credit union and community bank, leaving Main Street businesses with less access to credit, making it harder for your family to pay for everyday goods like gas and groceries. Tell Congress to guard your card and oppose the Durbin-Marshall credit card mandates.
Paid for by Electronic Payments Coalition.
Well, there's been lots of conversation, of course, about the travel ban, the woods ban, whatever we're going to call it, I suppose. And lots of divisiveness, and online is, of course, where a lot of this lives. But what does the charter say about your rights or not? And that is really, to me, what's really important here. What does the charter say when all is said and done? Wayne MacKay, Professor Emeritus of Law at Dalhousie University, joins us to help answer some of these questions. Wayne, thanks for joining the show as always.
No problem.
All right. So fundamentally, what does the charter say here about a travel ban like this?
Well, basically, the relevant sections of the charter are Section 7, which says everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of the person, which includes, obviously, as part of that liberty, the right to move around. And secondly, that you cannot be deprived of those rights except in accordance with fundamental justice. And that's a bit trickier part, but that is, in a way, a limitation which is echoed again in a way in Section 1 of the Charter, the reasonable limits on all rights. And that is that if you are going to take away rights in some way or limit them, then you have to do it for a compelling objective, and you have to do it in a reasonable and proportionate way. So I guess there's a lot there, but the right's there, but it can be deprived and is quite often when you think about seat belts or wearing helmets or whatever. Lots of times what we choose to do is restricted by the law, but as long as it's for a reasonable objective and done in a reasonable way, it's found not to violate the Charter. So that's the kind of debate that is playing out here and plays out in many areas.
Okay, so the burden of proving that was warranted by the government, how I suppose do you feel as though the government is responsible to demonstrate that in the public or not, or to justify it? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, that's a really important point. When you raise one of these charter issues in the courts, there's a shifting burden. The burden is on the person raising the challenge, in this case, the gentleman going through the woods, to show that there's a violation of rights. But that's pretty easy here because his liberty and security of the person and right to move around was limited. But then the burden shifts then to the government to say, however, we are limiting that right and we're entitled to do so because it's a reasonable limit in a free and democratic society. And it is the burden is clearly on the government for the critical part to show that there's a pressing and compelling objective, which is pretty easy here, but then also to show that the way they're doing it is both proportionate, that not larger than it needs to be, and reasonable.
Okay, how much do you think this is considered by government officials when making these decisions? Are they consulting with their lawyers, or how much consultation do you think is done before they make these types of decisions?
Well, hopefully a fair bit, because, of course, the Charter is a constitutional document that all laws have to operate within it, and it's generally governments don't want to or violate the Constitution or be seen to. So one would hope there would have been some discussion of that. There's not always as much as one might hope, and obviously there's time limits on something like this, where there's an emergency and a clearly pressing problem of wildfires, as we're witnessing as we talk here. And so maybe sometimes there isn't as much time for consultation, but I would think there would have been some, and there certainly will be more between now and when this case goes to court, if it does.
Does that in some way need to be demonstrated as well, that the government did all it could to get the best advice that it had at its ability to do so? Is that something or at its disposal?
It's not absolutely required, but it would certainly be helpful to the government's case if they said, we consulted our legal counsel and did these various investigations, and sometimes that's argued in this way, that other kind of similar situations are handled this way by previous cases or other provinces. For example, in this case, New Brunswick followed Nova Scotia in some ways, but didn't impose the high fine, but did other things. Newfoundland did the same thing, and in other provinces, like BC and so on, in Canada, but also other countries as well, facing the kinds of wildfires that probably as a result of climate change seem to be worldwide in some ways. And so that all helps their case as well. But as I say, the main thing that they would have to prove based on evidence in the court is that there's a good reason to do this, and that's pretty easy. But on this one, that it needed to be as broad as it is. And I think that's really the key debate here that people are having. This is a very broad-based ban, and therefore, is it necessary to do that to achieve your goal, or could you achieve the same kind of thing with a less rights-violating kind of plan? You know, for example, if you were banning some things but not walking as a thing in itself or something like that. And that's always a tricky one because it really does depend on the evidence. And it seems to me at the moment, and none of us have all the evidence on this, but fires seem to be capable of being started in many ways. And clearly, the safest thing is to have nobody in the woods at all. There's not much doubt about that. But is it a necessary thing to actually prevent or reduce the forest fires to go that far? Or is this, as this gentleman is arguing, is it an overreach by the government, or are you responding beyond what is proportionate and reasonable?
Okay, might there be an argument before the courts that there have been carve-outs for some, and including some homeless encampments are still being left? People are living in wooded areas, and there are golf courses which are operating. And might there be an argument to be made that look, there are those. This is not applicable to everybody.
That's true. That will be, I'm sure, part of the interesting arguments when and if this goes to court. But in as often with this kind of evidence, it actually goes both ways. It helps the government in this sense that they're going to say, well, it's not an absolute ban of everything. We've made some exemptions. We've recognized the livelihood interests of campgrounds and things as long as they don't have fires. We're rightly or wrongly recognizing golf and its attractions and so on. And we've recognized the situation of homeless encampments as not targeting people who are particularly vulnerable. So those are good things for us. But on the other hand, the people on the other side could say, well, how come that's not a fire risk, but me walking my dog or whatever is? So that's the kind of debate. So I think though that will be discussed, and it will likely be argued in favor of both sides arguing the case, which is rather interesting.
Is there any precedent that could be looked at or called upon here when it comes to this?
Well, I noticed in a Chronicle Herald article and some other places, the lawyer who is hired for the person challenging this, who's obviously deliberately making the case so he can test this, and that's happening. They're referring to a case in criminal law of somebody who was loitering, potentially a pedophile loitering for inappropriate purposes, and that the Supreme Court of Canada in a 5-4 split said that they couldn't assume that was the case and that they were violating his rights. Now, the argument, I think, has some big problems. First of all, this is not a criminal case. This is a civil case with a fine for that, which is a big distinction. And secondly, the key issues in that case were the application of Section 7 in the criminal law, where it's taken way more broadly than in civil cases. And secondly, the presumption of innocence, which is not at issue here. You do have a presumption of innocence in respect to crimes. You do not have a presumption of innocence in respect to civil offenses such as this. And in fact, I think Mr. Abbey was very clear that he intended and was deliberately violating this rule to test it. So I don't think it's as good an analogy as his lawyer is suggesting, and that will certainly be played out in the case. But I think there's always a lot of evidence disputes within these kind of cases. You know, how strong is the case that this is a big problem? That's pretty easy again. But how strong is the case that it needs to be as broad as it is? That's more debatable. But on the other hand, it is relevant here that the damage and tragedies that can come from forest fires is large and beyond dispute, unfortunately. But the value as a freedom of being able to walk your dog wherever you want. Nobody's stopping him from walking his dog anywhere but in the woods. But that's a right that some would say, well, that's pretty minor. And part of the very heated online debate about this, I think, is that it does seem like a somewhat trivial individual right, if there is such a thing on the one hand, and a very major social interest and societal protection on the other. So it can be portrayed as a debate about priorities. Is there something happening here which is not putting things in perspective?
Yeah, I suppose, but some might say this might appear trivial, but from trivial things can materialize larger things, right, down the road.
Oh, absolutely, and not to take away from his free speech rights, including his right to challenge in court within limits and so on, and the importance of rights protection generally. That this today might be seen as a trivial thing about walking a dog, but your right to move around without being restricted by the government, unless they have a really strong reason to do so, is a very important point of freedom and liberty. So, yes, I think there are points to be made on both sides, and that's why it's a bit disappointing, as it often is, that on the social media it's played out in kind of fairly nasty ways in some parts, as far as attributing bad motives or calling people selfish on one side or calling people stupid on the other side, all the kind of things that unfortunately tend to characterize many online debates. Whereas I think another important charter value that we should live as a society is free speech. You don't have to agree with somebody, but you should be respectful of their right to have their own view.
Right. Okay, Wayne. Great as always. Thank you, sir.
No problem. Thanks.
All right. Take care. Wayne MacKay, Professor Emeritus of Law at Dalhousie University. Air Canada and its flight attendant strike. We'll get to the bottom of this with Moshe Lander when we come back.
Thanks.
All right, Federal Jobs Minister Patty Hajdu is urging Air Canada and the union representing its flight attendants to return to the bargaining table. Canada's largest airline has requested government-directed arbitration, but Ottawa hasn't indicated whether it'll intervene in the dispute that could lead to a work stoppage this weekend. Air Canada canceling flights today until there's a complete stoppage by Saturday unless a deal is reached. Joining us to discuss all of this is Moshe Lander, Concordia University economist. Moshe, thanks for joining the show.
Hello. I hope everybody's safe out there with the fires on the outskirts of town, huh?
For sure, yeah. It's trying times and intense times for sure. So far, so good. So good. All right. So when it comes to this work stoppage or strike, I guess, what are your thoughts on the federal government? And do you think that? I mean, I would think that it would be tempting to intervene. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, for sure. There's a desire to avoid any work stoppage, especially for what is essentially Canada's national airline. The problem, of course, is that if the government intervenes, they're effectively sending a signal that they're siding with the employer over the employee. The only leverage that the employee has in negotiating is the ability to say, we're walking off the job and we're going to disrupt your business operations. So if they're forced back to the table into binding arbitration and maybe to even keep operations running, then implicitly it's the leverage goes entirely to Air Canada, and that's maybe not what you want the government doing these days.
Okay, an issue, of course, are wages, and the union suggests that they're not being paid for work that they're doing when the planes are not in the air. So, what do we know about the wage scale here? Do you know? Can you enlighten us on how much are these people making?
I couldn't tell you exactly what they're making because, of course, it's a function too of things like seniority and the specifics relating to which routes they're traveling and whether they're overnights and things like that. What I could tell you for sure, though, is that I think the vast majority of Canadians will feel that they're not properly compensated and that they're not necessarily being compensated for work that they have to do outside of the hours. I think for an analogy, right, you work more than just the hours that you're on the radio. Does the station compensate you for just the hours you're on the radio, or for the prep work that you do outside of it? Well, if they pay you a salary, then it's whatever you need to do to make sure that those hours you're on are tip-top quality. Hey, you figure that out whatever way you want to, whether you're being paid or not paid. It's the same sort of argument that's being put forward then to Air Canada employees, which is whether you're doing work on the ground or not, if you're being paid an hourly wage or you're being paid a salary, then you figure that out whatever way you need to and what you want to include in that or not.
All right, is it semantics in some way?
For some, I mean, to me it is. I think that, of course, Air Canada employees are going to say it absolutely isn't, and they want to be able to have a proper accounting of, in an Excel sheet, these are the number of hours I work, this is the number of dollars I want to be paid per hour, therefore this is the number of dollars that you need to pay me. Air Canada's comeback is, we pay you per flight, per year, per whatever, and then you figure out how you want to assign it. The key is that the numbers aren't adding up between the two sides, and there's a difference. And so within those semantics, there's still this desire for Air Canada employees to say, we want more. However it is that you want to justify it or explain it, that's on you. And Air Canada's pushback is, no, it's on you to figure out how you want to view what you're being paid per hour, per flight, per week.
All right. So in the meantime, this has to have if in fact, it would already have an impact because flights have already been canceled to some degree. So depending on how long this goes on, I would think would have to cost the Canadian economy quite a bit of money. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, for sure. I know that Porter and Flair, Air Transat, WestJet have all been contacted about being able to maybe support people that get stranded and need to get back. But the reality is that we're at the end of summer, and this is one of the busiest times in Canada for travel because everybody's getting in their last lick of summer before school begins again. And so they're already operating near capacity on a lot of their key routes, and they're not going to be able to absorb that. So if people start getting stranded, whether it's of leisure or business class, you got a problem on your hands here because people aren't going to be where they need to be. It could also just be a medium to long-term cost to the economy where people say, you know what, I don't think I want to fly anymore for business purposes. We saw that in the aftermath of COVID. This might just accelerate a trend where everybody's meeting on Teams or Zoom or whatever else they're using to communicate.
Yeah, absolutely. And the company itself, I mean, I would think that it would have to pay its pilots, would it not? And its ground crew and all of that stuff. It would have incurring costs. Obviously, it would be saving money not having planes in the air with fuel and maintenance. But still, this can't be good for Air Canada.
No, for sure. And there's still fixed costs involved whether you're flying or not. And don't forget that all of those planes that get grounded have to be stored somewhere. And so even though they don't have to be maintained for pre and post flight, they still need to be maintained because they're just sitting there and they have the capacity to be damaged in just a stationary state. So it is going to cost them money. Air Canada, of course, probably doesn't have the capacity to file for bankruptcy. The government might intervene at that point because it's just too essential to the Canadian economy. But I don't think that this would necessarily even last long enough that would be an issue. But if their quarterly reports are not as impressive, that has an impact beyond just Air Canada, right? Anybody who's invested, whether directly or indirectly through their pensions, is also going to find that this could affect them as well. So it has that capacity to have much broader effects than just the airline industry itself.
Right. And yeah, and it's hard for people to not get caught up in this because people make long-term plans, right? People have booked flights in some cases months ago. So it's not as though there was a sufficient runway for everybody to not get caught up in this.
And we had the exact same thing last year when we were talking about WestJet and WestJet's disruption. And as somebody who travels regularly between Montreal, Calgary, and Halifax, that was certainly a factor in decisions that I made in the last couple of weeks about my flight plans, which was I don't know for sure that Air Canada is going to be there. And next thing you know, I'm looking at other websites where I might not usually, saying, all right, maybe I'll give this one a try, merely as a way to ensure that I'm going to be able to get to my destination when I need to. But of course, that also shifts relative demand and could start showing up in prices then. If WestJet realizes, hey, Air Canada could be grounded, and we got a lot of people that are going to start coming over here, that starts pushing up the price of their flights because demand starts to exceed supply. And that itself can have consequences then in terms of people's cost of living affordability issues.
Yeah, never miss an opportunity to make more money, right? That's capitalism 101, right? Unfortunately, or fortunately, it's the way it is.
Absolutely. But, of course, the key thing, too, Todd, is that because we have an industry that lacks real competition, that's what gives them that market power to be able to increase their prices. Not that there would be thousands of different airlines flying in Canada, but if there were more of them, the existing airlines would think twice about increasing their price, realizing that there's a whole bunch of competition that could jump on their price gouging. That doesn't happen, though, in the absence of competition. So one of the things the federal government should always be looking at is how do we pry open competition? And this might be an impetus for them to step in and say, beyond the fact we might push you to binding arbitration, we might look at now letting in some of those American airlines or European airlines to start offering flight options as a way to try and eliminate some of these disruptions.
Moshe, always informative. Thank you. We'll do it again.
Anytime.
All right. Take care. Moshe Lander, Montreal's Concordia University economist. A longtime employee takes over Nova Scotia bookstore after rallying to keep it afloat. We'll talk to this new owner when we come back.
Axe.
I saw this pretty interesting story on the CBC website recently. Longtime employee takes over Nova Scotia bookstore after rallying to keep it afloat. Jacob Smith is the new owner of John W. Doull Bookseller in Dartmouth and joins me for a chat. Jacob, thanks for joining the show. Congratulations, I think, is in order, first of all.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. So this is something that you've been eyeing for quite a number of years now. You wanted, or you thought that you would be a good owner, or that this might be something that you'd like to own, right?
Yeah, well, it was more of a dream before, but it didn't seem that feasible until a couple of weeks ago, yeah.
All right, so how did this all happen? Give everybody the story.
I can't remember exactly what day it was, but late July, I came into work one day and was told that a bailiff was coming later to change the locks and that we had about 5 days before we would get kicked out of the building. Nobody was really very hopeful at the time, but then me and my friend Sam got together and fixed the place up before the next week with the big closing sale, and we made enough money there that I could feasibly try to continue the store, and John was done, so he sold it to me, and that was that.
Right, so there was a lot of back rent, was there not?
There was, yeah, 2 months, and then we needed 1 month ahead, so $20,000 to $25,000.
Okay, and where'd that money come from?
Oh, well, a lot of the people in the community, Halifax and Dartmouth and even outside, came and showed up for that whole week, and it was nonstop transactions the entire time. The store was completely full, even right till 5 p.m., which is our closing time. It still would take 30 to 45 minutes to clear the store.
All right, and one of the most extensive collections of used books in all of Canada, according to the story. That's accurate? Who determined that?
Well, I didn't. I assume John did, but he has a lot of know-how in that situation. A lot of bookstores have been closing recent years since COVID anyway, so I wouldn't doubt it.
All right, so what makes you feel as though, why are you confident that you can make a go at this?
Well, I've been working here for 6 years, doing a lot of things by myself anyway. I've been the only full-time employee for the last few years, and I know how to run the store. There's still a lot of things to learn about the books themselves, but now that we have most of our debt cleared up, and a lot of publicity and a lot of people coming up to show support and wanting to keep the bookstore here, I think it'll be a new chapter for us.
Yeah, are you? How did you get? Where did your interest begin when it comes to books and used books in particular?
Well, I've read pretty much my whole life. I've always been an avid reader, and I got this job when I needed something when going to Dalhousie and moving to the city. So a family friend knew John very well and said, "Here's your man," and it was me, and I've been here ever since.
Okay, and what are your plans for it? What is your vision for the store, I guess?
We're trying to clean it up, make it a little bit more accessible and get things off the floor, but really we're going to hopefully keep it majorly the same. I mean, it was really just, it had deteriorated from, I don't know, lack of motivation or whatever you want to say, but now we've got a little bit of motivation in us and inspiration to do some new things. We'd like eventually to do maybe some art events or music events, or there's all kinds of ideas in our heads, but we're right now looking at the finances to see what's feasible.
Where do you get your inventory from?
A lot of it is donations. Back in the golden years of John's, he would buy collections or pay book scouts to go to yard sales and so on, but we haven't been able to do that for years and years. That is something we'd love to do in the future if we can find enough money. But right now, we're just mostly going on donations.
How many books do you have?
Hundreds of thousands at least.
Is that right? Hundreds of thousands?
Oh, yeah, easy.
Wow. And how do you price them?
I just go with the gut feeling half the time, but if it looks like it's worth something, I'll look it up on some websites or I'll contact some people.
What type of used books is there a genre that is more common than others? I suppose there would be, but what's popular?
I mean, most people just want fiction. A lot of people buy like thrillers, so James Patterson, that kind of thing, David Baldacci, but mostly just fiction in general or local history. Those are our two biggest sellers, I would say.
All right, and how about the online component to it? Selling online, I'm sure that's part of the ongoing business plan?
Yeah, well, right now we're still a little bit behind because in the whole closing sale, we got about 100 orders or more probably in 3 or 4 days. So we're still catching up on that. But in the past, it was the online stuff that kept us open at all because that's where our first editions or rare books are, and we sell them all around the world. So.
Yeah, for sure. And do you have a lot of repeat customers? I'm sure you do. You probably have some people that come in all the time, kind of to browse and look around. And what's the average cost, if there's an average? How much do these books cost? What average price tag would there be on a book?
We have a lot of regulars, people who have been coming here for years that we know quite well, but I think we're getting a few new ones now. And as far as a book cost, if you're just getting a little paperback, I'd say probably $3 to $5, and if you're getting a hardcover on something, maybe $8 to $15. Yeah.
So I guess what I'm getting at is that the volume is key here, right? Moving a lot of books is important.
Yeah, well, we have way too many books in here for us to deal with, so we are trying to get as many out as possible so we can properly organize the back shop and the upstairs and so on.
Yeah, for sure. And I suppose long term potentially expand? I suppose you don't want to get ahead of yourself. You just want to be able to make this a profitable business first.
Yeah, well, that is the main thing. Of course, it'd be a dream to own the building that we're in, but that's certainly far down the line. I don't think we would ever be able to afford to buy this one. But if we could, we might move to a slightly smaller location, and if we could buy it ourselves. But that's a bit of a dream right now.
Yeah. And there's something to be said, right, for the novelty or buying a book and the tactile nature of a book, because it was thought years ago that e-readers would replace a lot of, and I'm sure that it has to a degree replace some, but I think that for avid readers, there's the experience of flipping through the pages that you can't replicate with something electronic looking at a screen.
No, you can't. Not at all, in my opinion. It's a physical thing to do instead of just a screen and a click, and we're way too used to screens at this time.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's pretty interesting stuff, and congratulations on this, and let's hope that things go well for you, and let's have a chat in the future.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Thank you very much.
All right, pal. Take care. Jacob Smith, new owner of the book of the John W. Doull, the previous owner's bookseller. And in Dartmouth. So get over there and support them, folks. And it's a pretty cool initiative. Young man right there who's living his dream and living his passion. So that's a great thing. I saw that story and I thought I'd like to chat with him. And I always have a lot of respect anyway for entrepreneurs. In particular young entrepreneurs, and in particular people who are doing something that they love and are passionate about. That's a good news story in my humble opinion. And let's hope and wish the best. And let's hope that I'm sure that the local community will support it. Invasive plants are growing in Wolfville Park. This group is doing something about it. Why is this important? What's this all about? Find out when we come back.
Facts.
I saw this story also on the CBC website recently. The headline, invasive plants are growing in a Wolfville Park. There's a group cutting the problem at its root. Joining me to talk about all this is David Steele, member of the Blomidon Naturalists Society. David, thanks for joining the show.
Oh, hi, Todd. Thanks very much for having me. And it's the Blomidon Naturalists Society.
Yeah, my apologies.
Yeah.
All right, what does the Blomidon Naturalist Society do?
Well, they are exactly that. They're a club of naturalists and biologists that are interested in a huge range of biological subjects, you name it, and they're interested in it. So, of course, any sort of environmental issues that are important in the community are of concern to them, as well as bigger issues like bigger topics like the geology of Nova Scotia and big and small interests.
Okay, so we're talking with the Reservoir Park. Let everybody know about the Reservoir Park.
Well, it's probably the most popular park in Wolfville. It's high up on the along the Wolfville Ridge. And it formerly was the water supply with a couple of ponds up there, so that's where it gets its name. There's a couple of reservoir spring-fed ponds, and they are now a recreational. At the center of a recreational park, it's about 25 acres of wooded land with hiking and walking and cycling trails, a whole internet of them through the woods and around the ponds. I would say hundreds of Wolfville citizens use the park. There's dog walking around the park, and so at times there's more dogs than people up there.
All right, so tell us about invasive plants and why this is such a challenge to deal with, and why it's important to do something about it.
Well, invasive plants are really one of the big causes of the biodiversity crisis. And so there are three principal species that we're focused on removing in the park, although there are quite a few others that are around and there as well. So the Norway maple, which is a big shade tree, it is one of our target species. The multiflora rosa is a shrub, a thorny thicket-forming shrub, and the other one, and the biggest. Probably our biggest concern these days, because there's the most of it in the areas we're working, is the glossy leaf buckthorn plant. And the Nova Scotia Invasive Species Council considers it the biggest threat to plant communities in the province. So a lot of residents find it growing in their yards and are sometimes after us to find out how do I get rid of this. So it's important because these plants basically outcompete our native species plants like the sugar maple and our other trees and shrubbery, and they're capable of forming monocultures. In other words, taking over, dominating the woods, and they're they are well on the way to doing this in the Reservoir Park, and so that's the concern of the people that make up the volunteer people that make up the team that are doing the work in the park right now are deeply concerned about this.
And how do they get here?
How did they get here? Oh, well, they were brought over. The Norway maple was brought over by an American entrepreneur who thought it was a wonderful shade tree, and he could grow it and sell it and make lots of money. And it's continued to be treated that way by a lot of plant nurseries. When the Dutch elm disease killed off a lot of the big street trees in Halifax and Wolfville, why the powers that be went looking for replacements, and the Norway maple was their choice. It's a very fast-growing tree, and it stands up well to urban pollution.
Mm-hmm.
And because it grows so fast, it's cheap to produce. So I think probably the price tag was a big issue there. So anyway, the street trees in Wolfville are predominantly Norway maples now, and this thing spreads like mad. It's a prolific seed producer, and those seeds spread by the wind, and so they spread from the streets into the park. Any adjoining wooded area, why the Norway maples, if there's Norway maples on the streets, they're going to get in there. The glossy leaf buckthorn was brought over. There's some debate on that. Some think it was the Acadian French that brought it. It's a bit of a gentle laxative, as well as was popular in Europe in the farming community as a hedge tree. So I think they brought it over for both of those purposes. And this is back in the 1800s. And the multiflora rosa was brought over originally as a rootstock for cultivated roses. And it was also brought over, and the planting of it was encouraged by a lot of government agencies, because this thing forms such dense thorny thickets that if you put it between pastures or between fields where the cows can't get through it. So it was considered to be desirable for a while until they figured out, the dangers of its spreading. So those are the three. They're all brought over by our culture, sometimes pretty well intentioned.
Okay, and what are the interactions with habitat and I guess things that rely on habitat? Any ill effects there?
Yeah, a lot of ill effects because these things can become dominant in the landscape. Why they basically displace the trees that and the shrubbery that support, especially that support the important insects in our ecosystem. So the two groups of insects that are so important to us, obviously, are the pollinators that pollinate 90% of all flowering plants. So when these guys, when these invasive species get in there, why they prevent the important insects to our ecosystems from producing, from multiplying. The other group of insects are basically the plant eaters, the herbivores, and they're the meat and potatoes of our ecosystems, and they depend on native species, trees and shrubs for their food supply. So once the invasive species take over, why that is, we basically lose a huge amount of our important insect populations.
Okay, and what are your efforts to do something with this? Just let everybody know quickly what the efforts are to try and curb.
Well, we have a team of volunteers, and what we do is we go into we rope off an area in the woods. We've been sort of focusing on areas 250 to 300 square meters, and we lay out a grid on the woods, and then we remove the invasive plants either by hand pulling, or then we have some other tools, a weed wrench. Sometimes the glossy leaf buckthorn tends to form clumps, and you'll have anywhere from 3 or 4 to even a dozen stems. Some of them are 2 or 3 inches in diameter, and they form and are tree-sized, like 20, 25 feet high. And so we have some large weed wrenches to remove those, and also we use a 6-foot pry bar as well. Mm-hmm. And we have some very keen and some strong young people that really love the physical workout they get doing this. And the other thing we do is we keep track of the number of plants that we pull in each block of our grid. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, we had one grid in the area working in now where we pulled 1,524 glossy leaf buckthorn plants in a block which was 11 square meters.
Right. Okay, David, listen, interesting. We're just out of time. Thanks for doing this, and we'll good luck with this. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much for your interest, Todd.
All right, take care. You got it. David Steele, member of the Blomidon Naturalists Society. I'd like to thank Vanessa Van Den Ness on the other side of the glass, the control board, doing a fine job as always. Thanks for listening, everybody. We're back tomorrow, 10 o'clock. See you then.